this is something that you can utilize. This is something that you can improve and work on just like any other skill. It's not something you're born with. I think that there are certainly personality types and, different parts of your life that play into your organization and your discipline within that.
Welcome to the Team Local Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients to give you guys the tools that you need to be successful for life. This week, I'm joined by a very special guest, Steph Lawler. So excited to have you on, and we're going to talk about time management. And this is something that you have unique skills that you can definitely share here. But I think it's just such an important topic that a lot of us overlook. And we always feel like we're like the chicken with our head cut off, like running around. So quick background, and then I'll let Steph introduce herself. So we are both elite trainers for First Form. That's how we met. It was a few years ago. Like I can't remember exactly like when it was, but she's awesome. We've gotten to know each other over the past few years. And she's somebody that I really look up to, especially, just as a mom and a person in the industry. And, especially with this topic, and you have so much going on and you balance it very well, or it seems like it on the outside, like you're doing a great job. And I really wanted to talk about this because I think a lot of people, like I said, struggle here. So give us a little bit of your background, quickly, Steph.
Yeah, for sure. So my background is actually education. I taught for 20 years, 7 years high school and 13 years college, English both places. I am a mom. I've got two girls. Hannah is 18, Neely just turned 15. My youngest is special needs. So she's got cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, a whole host of acronyms. But I think looking at that background lends itself to probably appearing as if I have it all together and do it well. And I think to some extent I do, but it's really been out of a force of need, in trying to juggle all these moving parts of my life, whether it was in education or now 6 years ago when I made this transition into health and wellness. It's something that I have to do to make sure that I can show up and be present for all of these different parts of my life. So, with that being said, 6 years ago, I made the transition out of teaching. I knew that I wanted to still work in education, but do it in a little different format. Health and wellness has always been a huge part of my life, but absolutely more so along my journey with my daughter, just because I started to understand the importance of prioritizing myself, my health, so that I could be the best for her, advocate for her in the ways that she needed, but then also be there for my family, for my husband and other daughter as well. So I think when you are a teacher, time management is probably a big skill in your wheelhouse. And part of that is forced. You're on a really regimented schedule. You have your first period, second period, all that. So it does create this framework for you. But I think I started to see that framework fall apart when I left education and things weren't so regimented. And all of a sudden, here I am owning my own business. I'm working from home. I primarily coach online. And I just sat here and thought, well, what do I do? You don't have this framework anymore, and there's not really anyone over my head or saying it's time to get on to the next class. So I had to figure this whole thing out, and I think I didn't understand the connection between how I was functioning in my teaching life to when I jumped out of it. So that really is kind of the short background and where I am, and what I've learned along the way that I can share with you guys.
Yeah, I think that whether you're a teacher or in a very structured job or even in school, we are so used to that structure, right? We're so used to, okay, we either have classes all day or we, in college, you have classes, sporadically throughout the day, but you still have a structure, right? Like, and even in grad school, when it's very like hands off, to a degree, you still have things that you have to go to, right? And then I know that a lot of people, and not even people who work for themselves, that is like a whole thing, but just working at home, for a lot of people has been a huge struggle with this. And I know a lot of people last year transitioned to working from home. And I saw so many clients just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. And of course, last year was very different as well because in a lot of places, kids were at home too, working. Like there was just a lot going on. But no matter who you are, I think that we can probably all do a little bit of an audit with our time management. And I think that that's one of the biggest struggles, even for me, somebody who's, people think, oh, you're so organized. It's like, yeah, I'm really organized, but I can still struggle with this. Like, and obviously, if you aren't organized, this is going to be more of a challenge. But what everybody's time management looks like to them is very different. So these are not like, oh, you have to do like, you need to schedule things this perfectly. This is not what this is about. These are just general concepts that you can apply in the best ways for you moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look at any sort of organizational framework, whether it's how you organize your home or how you organize your time, there is such individuality in that. I always think about how my classroom was organized when I taught high school. I had folders and I had notebooks and everything. Anyone could have come into my classroom at any time and taken over because that was how I had it structured. But my best friend that I taught with, I would go into her room and almost have an anxiety attack because she just had stacks. She had piles everywhere. But I can tell you, she at any moment could tell you exactly which pile, how far down in the pile was that sheet of paper that you were looking for. So it's all very individualistic. And I think that that's the concept, right? This is a skill that we can all work on. This is a skill that we can improve on. And the execution of it is going to look different person to person. But I think it also lends itself to speak on the fact that this is something that you can utilize. This is something that you can improve and work on just like any other skill. It's not something you're born with. I think that there are certainly personality types and different parts of your life that play into your organization and your discipline within that. But just like anything, it's a skill that you can develop. And I think a lot of people look at time management and think it is so structured and so rigid and it doesn't allow for any kind of flexibility. And I would argue it's just the opposite. I know that for me as a mom trying to juggle all of the parts there, and as a special needs mom, there's certainly some challenges with that, but it actually allows me a lot more freedom and a lot more flexibility in having that audit of my time. And again, we'll go through some strategies today. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be the thing that you have to do, but I do think it's worthy of talking about and just at least going through the initial steps of auditing where does your time go? Because once you can do that, you really can maximize productivity. And I think nothing, if nothing more, it allows you to be a lot more present in those parts of your life as opposed to just flying by the seat of your pants and trying to multitask all the time as much as people think that that's a good thing and they do so well multitasking. At the end of the day, we're not. If we're having to divide our attention over three things, we're only giving each of those a third of our attention as opposed to 100% all in on that one task.
Yeah, they've done, I mean, multiple studies on this. I mean, it is pretty well known that this, multitasking or just switching between different inputs and outputs, they some people title it attention residue. So basically, like, you click on a Word doc and then you go do something else, and then you open an email and then you open a text. You're still thinking about all of these other things. Like it hasn't just like completely left you. And I know I always talk about this guy and this book, but it seriously is such a game changer. Cal Newport is such an amazing author, and two of his books in this area have completely changed how I think about stuff. Deep Work and Digital Minimalism. Two amazing books that look. Digital minimalism is also about the digital world that we live in, so that's like a whole added layer which we can touch on too. How that basically just like crushes all of time management. But those are, there's a lot of really great science in there, and everything Steph is saying is literally backed up by research. Like we think that we're good when we're doing a lot, but we're not. And then everybody knows, like, when there's certain times, yeah, you got to be doing a few things at once because that's just the way that the fucking cards fell, and that's life, and you got to do it, right? But how much more enjoyment can you actually get out of something, or how much more productivity can you actually get out of something when you're just focusing on that one task? And that's about, setting your day up and all that. So let's get into it. Let's
Yeah.
start with some of the nitty gritty.
Sure. I think, and to start this conversation, we have to look at why is this important? And it's just like Lauren and I both teach with our clients. If you don't make that connection for your clients and help them to see why this is an important skill, why this is going to be something that is an improvement in your life, you're not vested in this process. So we know that time management is important because without it, you're going to feel overwhelmed, you feel frustrated, you feel very inefficient, and you do have a harder time achieving your goals. So whether that's a personal goal or professional goal, it's just going to make it all that much more difficult. And I think the other part of it is at the end of the day, you're not really able to best deliver the outcome that you're desiring. You're forgetting tasks, you're shortcutting processes, you are feeling as if you're in so many places at one time. And it just allows you from being present to whatever that particular task is. So we know that there are some really important benefits of it. And I think there are some crucial skills that we have to have when looking at time management. So time management absolutely has to involve planning. And again, this planning notion is very different person to person. There has to be some decision making within that and prioritization of what is urgent and what is important. This is a place that is very difficult for me because I work in this space where, in my world, everything seems to be urgent. And it's definitely a place where I've had to step back and see the differences between those two. I think also another skill that we have to have is setting boundaries, learning to say no to people, setting those boundaries and really holding the line with those and also with ourselves. We have to make sure within time management we're able to delegate, we're able to outsource. This is a skill that is hard for so many of us if we're type A, if we own our own businesses. We have these things that are our babies and we don't want to let go, but we're not able to scale and grow if we can't begin delegation of tasks. And it might not even be delegating work tasks. It may be taking something else off of your plate. Like 2 or 3 years ago, we started to pay to have somebody come in and clean our house every couple of weeks. And that's not a task I particularly hate. I almost enjoy it. Like it's therapeutic for me to clean. I take pride in keeping a nice home and that sort of thing. But when I looked at how much time that was eating into a weekend, whether that was time I could spend with my family or, during the weekdays, that was something that I had to delegate. I had to let go of that. And as my business has grown, different assistant tasks as well, but learning to break free from some of those things. I think also under time management, we have to understand how to properly build systems, how to have processes for different parts of our life. And I think a lot of times we think systems and processes really only applies to your job, to those professional tasks. And it's not at all true. What is your system for, maintaining your home, for grocery shopping, for getting your kids to the places they have to go? And with that, it's the diligence and the consistency to follow through with those systems and processes. So I think as we start this conversation, those are probably five of the most important skills under this concept of time management. Organizing and dividing your time between these specific activities, you really have to have those five.
For sure, and the delegation can definitely be hard, and I think this really speaks to a bigger point with the idea of, like, planning and organizing, and, like, you touched on, it's not just for work. A lot of times people will put this only in, like, the work bucket, and this does go to literally everything else because even if you work a lot, there's still an other part to your life, you know what I mean? Unless you are single, have no kids, don't talk to anybody else, like you literally only work, then I would say that yes, you need to really prioritize and manage your work schedule. But for everybody else who has other things going on, you're going to have to look at like, hey, when are you grocery shopping, right? Like, and especially that's really important for people like our clients that are listening, and like we have to go down with that. So, hey, are we going once a week, twice a week? Like, why didn't you prep food? Was it because you couldn't go to the grocery store? Is it because you didn't have time for it? Should you get food delivered? Should you like, right? Like, there's all these different things like we need to work through, and it seems really small and silly, but it's not. Like, when are you getting food and when are you prepping it? Because that's how you're going to eat. And we have to plan those things in a week within like a healthy context of a diet. Now, like, let's say you're trying to, manage your kids' schedules. Like, that requires a lot of planning as well. So I want everybody to recognize that this is important for every aspect of your life, not just your business. But of course, this will certainly help with productivity for your business. And so many people, I think, they hear this and they're always like, oh, too much planning. I don't want to do this. And it's so rigid, like you said. But really, that is where the freedom comes in. Because guess what? When you can actually set those boundaries and you can say, okay, I'm going to be doing this task from these hours, then I'm going to go do this. You actually have that flexibility to do more things. Something comes up in the middle of the day that you have to do, you know how to correct it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to not allow to change my time. This is what I'm actually going to do later because I can. And again, nobody here is perfect, right? Like there are some nights where I'm like, yeah, I want to be done by this time, and I'm not, right?
Right.
Or there's some days where certain things come up in the middle of the day, and it's like, man, I had to, record this podcast and go on this call and do something else, and it's like, shit, now I got to work later because this happened awkwardly. And so life happens, but in a general thing, I know for me, this even helps too, like just getting things going. Like when you have something like scheduled, like, man, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna do this. Like that's something to like look forward to. It sounds like really depressing, but I, like I don't mean it to sound really negative and sad, but like you wake up, you're like, oh, I need to go do this, right? Instead of just like mosey around, like, oh, I'll get up when I get up. Like, no, gotta get up, gotta go for a walk because then I have this call and then I gotta go do this and da da da, all this stuff. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned in my transition from teaching to working for myself is If I didn't have that set schedule, written the night before, then I would not wake up with any kind of purpose. And I would hit snooze. And all of a sudden I'm like, shit, it's 8:30 and I'm just now getting my day going. And I still want to go take a walk. And all these other
Yep.
parts. And it just left me feeling incredibly overwhelmed. So you're exactly right. For me, it's that same sort of thing. I know exactly what I am doing the next day, right? And so when I go to bed at night, I have that in my mind, not to a place where it causes me anxiety. If anything, it's almost a sense of peace for me because I know exactly what I'm going to face the next day. Now there are always pieces of life that are going to be thrown at you. There are always variables that you are unaware of or can't control, but at least it does. It gives me that sense of purpose every day, and I think the way I see this too is with a lot of my clients who are stay-at-home moms. This has been very helpful for them because listen, as a mom who tried to stay at home for a year, it is really easy to just float through life and the end of the day comes and you don't at all feel purposeful. You don't really even know what you have done, and I remember feeling that same way. I'm like, shit, it's 6 o'clock, Lane's getting home. I haven't even taken a shower. I don't know what I've done. I have a 1-year-old who sleeps 14 hours a day, and I don't really know where the day has gone, but I felt very I felt very unfulfilled. And so I think that fulfillment piece is really rewarding for a lot of people who want to make sure they feel as if they have a sense of purpose, whether that is in being a mom who stays at home or you're balancing both parts of your life or with the clients that we work with. We hear a lot of I don't have time for that. And it's you just have to make time, but there's always that adjustment when you bring something new into your schedule. There is that adjustment period where you have to get more efficient at what your previous schedule is so that you can now make time for whatever this new thing is. And so like you said, it becomes just a means to an end to help you get to your goals, to have this sense of purpose. And I think we can kind of just jump right into some of the processes
Yeah.
involved in improving time management if that's okay with you.
Let's go.
So it's funny when I was making this list of some overall guidelines for how you can do this, a lot of this is very similar to the timeline and the structure that we give to our clients. Okay, we have a client coming in and we're doing some intake with them, and these are some of the things that we look at. But the first thing I always do for myself or the clients that I work with, whether it's on the fitness side or on more life skill stuff, is doing an honest audit of your time. Where does your time go? And for most of us, we're very unaware of that. And when you look at people who are incredibly successful, right, high income earners and people who have seen success in some part of their life, this is one of the things that they are masters of. They're acutely aware of where their hours go. And I think the vast majority of people have no idea. I didn't know. I just was like, well, I mean, I work from 7:30 to 3:30 and then I'm mom from 3:30 to 10:30. That's how I would have encapsulated it. So one of the best things that you can do, just like we would say with our clients when they start logging and tracking their food, is just go in and take an honest audit of your day, right? Do a couple of weekdays, do some weekend time, break that down into 30-minute, 1 hour increments. Don't change anything, but literally just force yourself to keep a little notebook with you or some kind of tool where you can actually log what it is you're doing specifically, not just the blocking 7:30 to 3:30 I'm working. This was one of the things that I would see with a lot of my clients when they would tell me they don't have time, and I would ask them to do the same thing. Well, I'm working. Well, what are you doing in those hours between 7:30 to 3:30? I know when I taught, there were certain hours I had to be in a classroom. I had so many instructional hours, and then I had so many office hours per week. So I knew exactly what I was doing in my classroom hours. But then I had 10 hours a week that I had to sit during office hours. What was I doing during that time? I would get really frustrated when I wasn't making good use of those office hour times. And then I have to bring home all these papers to grade and I have planning that I have to do on the weekends. So I got really good at managing those office hour times, but I would see the same thing around me. I sat in an office that was full of cubicles of other instructors. So I would look around and sort of see what they were doing during their office hours and they're on Facebook and they're, you know, filing their nails. I don't know, all these other things. But these are the same people. And I was in the same group who would then complain that I had to do all this work on the weekends, right? So I think step one is doing exactly that. Take an honest look at where your days go. Where do your hours go? And take a good audit of that first.
Yeah, that's so powerful because I'm guilty of that too. I'm busy, I'm doing this, and then you really I think where this really gets highlighted, and I'm sure people listening can understand, when you are given a short block of time that you have to do something in, because then you are literally forced to either leave or do something else. Like, it's not like, oh, I can keep working. Like, you're like, I only have 2 hours to do this. You will recognize how effective you are when you do that, right? Like, I always talk about, like, I like working on planes. Obviously, certain times where you don't, there's screaming kids and just kicking you, whatever. For the most part, what I like about it is that everything else is like literally shut off from me. Um, I might have the internet because I've bought it and I'm downloading stuff for clients. Um, but honestly, perfect situation is I don't even get that because I mean the internet's so glitchy anyway on the plane, let's be honest. But
Yes.
I've downloaded a bunch of updates before and I'm just working on them, or I'm working on a presentation, or I'm writing an article, something like that. I can get so much done in that time period that I'm like, wow, I must just fuck off so much during the day and don't even realize it, because when you have that, like, you got to get it done now, we can be really effective. And I think that it's important to understand that like, hey, I got 2 hours of really, really good work in. You can't do that all day. You can't do that for 8 hours. Like, nobody, and this is what, Cal Newport and some other neuroscientists and people like that talk about. When you're doing like really intense, like deep work, you can probably do about 3 hours, maybe 4 if you're really good at it, right? And, there's this one neuroscientist, Dr. Huberman, I always talk about him, I love his stuff, but he talks about working in, like, these kind of ultradian cycles of, like, 90 minutes, and he talks about doing, like, 2 very, very focused 90-minute sessions, and, you'd be really surprised what you can do in that period, and it's not to say that you're not working the rest of the day, you're just working for 3 hours, but there's other low-level tasks that you can do that don't require as much brain power, but we really do need to set that time aside in order to actually be productive, and that's about setting the rest of your schedule so that you actually can have those focused hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, whatever it is. And I think that yeah, you'd be really surprised when you do actually audit yourself. I know for me, it's almost like more of like an OCD tendency, which not surprising because I have a lot of this, is like grabbing the phone, to just look at something, and you don't even recognize why you grabbed it or what you're doing. But then because it is so distracting, you just, oh, ding, 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 ding. And then you're just looking, you're like, why am I on my phone? Why am I doing this? Or you're like, oh, I'll just answer this message or these two messages. Well, then guess what happens? We talked about in the beginning, the attention residue. I've answered now two messages, but what else am I doing? Now I'm thinking about it. Now I see the other messages. Now I want to, there's a comment, there's a new post. Oh, that's a post. That's a really good post. And then you're somehow on the explore page and you're like, what am I doing? And that's exactly how they've designed it. So that's why we all get caught into it. But it's like, okay, was I really effective during the day, or was I just like on here as well? And the hard part is, and this is why I have such a love-hate relationship with social media, because I know all of this and I know how it can be so frustrating, and some other frustrating things that we were just talking about off air, that can be on there. But it literally is this great thing, right? So you're like, I love it, but it's designed to distract you. That's
That's
how
it.
it works. You know what I
That's
mean?
it.
And even if you know that, you can still find yourself doing it. Like the creators of the apps are even like, I can't even have it on my phone or whatever. Like, I struggle with it. You're like, damn, like you literally know everything about it and you're still going to it. So it's almost like this like a tendency to just grab it, and then you're looking at something and then you're thinking about it, and then so we really, I would say that probably one of the biggest time sucks, at least for me, is the phone. And the hard part is, like I said, we use that for our work.
That's it. Yeah.
So it is work, right? So you're like, how do you prioritize certain work over other work? And so it gets kind of dicey to manage all that, but
Yeah, it is hard, and I do that same thing. I'm like, well, I'm on my phone, but I'm working. But if I'm being very honest with myself, a lot of times I'm not. I'm down the rabbit hole. I did the same thing that you're talking about yesterday. I must have picked up my phone 4 times. I'm like, why did I even start this? What was that thing I was going to do in picking up my phone? I've looked at all these other things and gone down the rabbit hole, but like I literally had to go back to my to-do list. I'm like, what was I even doing? What got me down this path to begin with? So
you're like, this was probably not on the list, but
not at all, not at all, not at
no.
all. So I think once we do this and we have this time audit, and Lauren and I both really love data and being able to look at this and make some analysis from it. So I think that's the second thing you do is you go back and look at this as raw data. You analyze it, you audit it, you highlight periods of dead time in your day. You highlight what those time wasters are. Social media probably being the biggest one. And then the other thing you do is you highlight what are your hours of productivity. For me and for a lot of my clients who are parents, our hours of productivity are the school hours. And man, it's short. By the time I drop Neely off at school and then I have to leave to go get her, I literally have between 9:15 in the morning until about 2:40, 2:45 in the afternoon. And that's the productive time that I have. So I am very hyper aware of that. And I absolutely prioritize that time for things that I can't do with her. If I've got to go run to the grocery store and to go to the post office to get stamps, there's no way in the world I would work that into those hours of productivity because that's something that I could do with her when I don't have to be hyper focused. And like you said, have those really specific times where you are dialed in on that. So now that's the second step is go through and analyze what you're seeing. If you've done a good job and you are very honestly writing these things down, use three different color highlighters. I'm an incredibly visual person. So for me to see, oh, okay, that's dead time. That is wasted time. This is my block of productive hours, and I tend to have those during the school day. And I'm a night owl. So I've got another batch of productive hours at night when the world is shut down and my home is quiet. And seeing those things highlighted was really eye opening for me. And it helped me to get into that third step, which is just setting those daily tasks.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes where people can start to feel overwhelmed. I know there's so many different systems for this, right? There's,
Right.
pick the top 3 things, the top 5 things, get a planner that has an hour by hour thing, like breakdown, and, plan exactly when you're going to go do stuff. And um, I think that there's a lot of pros to that, especially if you've been doing this for a while. Like I know for me, there's certain things that really help. Like you said, hey, there's certain hours that like these are the work hours that I need to be doing productive stuff. I know for me, like at this point now, for most days, it depends on the day, but a lot of days, if I'm in a normal busy work day, I need to train earlier. Otherwise, it's probably not going to happen later. And sometimes it does. Like the other day, I literally had to train at 7 o'clock because the whole day got away from me and I had to train that. So it just kind of happened, right? um, but there's certain times that are really important to be hyper focused with like when you're doing things. But also if you're just starting with this and this seems really overwhelming, just pick a few things that you need to do and start there. You don't have to be so overwhelmed like, oh my gosh. I know for me, and everybody's different here too with what they like. So I'm a very big like handwritten person. I do not like I already don't like putting stuff on like the internet, like typing everything and Google Calendar. And there's so many people that you follow and they show like screenshots of their Google Calendar and everything's color coded and everything's perfect and all this. And here's again where my like OCD tendencies come in. Like I have to make sure that everything is like perfect with that because it's online, so you can make it like look perfect essentially, and like everything needs to be spaced the right way, typed the right way. Like how are the color codes going? Like I get so caught up with things that do not matter there. Whereas if I have a planner, like I love Emily's planner, the Paper and Plan Co. It goes hour by hour, and then there's a few other slots in there too. That is so useful for me, so I can just write it down. Everybody makes fun. Like we had a first form group text for setting up a call, and I was somewhere. I was at a show with clients, and everybody's like, "Oh, can we do this call at this time?" And I was like, I'll let you guys know I'm at an event right now, and I'll get back to my calendar in a few hours." And they're like, "Don't you have that on your phone?" I was like, "Oh no, like I don't know anything. If there's very few things that are on my phone."
No, and Lauren is so my spirit animal because I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, let me look at my planner and my paper calendar. And I
Yeah.
just said the same thing yesterday. I had a meeting up with a friend next week and he's like, well, how does 6:30 on Wednesday sound? I said, I'm gonna have to get back to you when I get home and can look at my planner. And he just died laughing. He's like, what do you mean you don't have that on your phone? I'm like, no, I absolutely do not. I literally have the piece of paper. So I think that's such a good point. When you're able to go back through and analyze and audit the time and figure out where these periods of dead time are and periods of productivity, then that's what you do. You go in and set your daily schedule. And just like Lauren said, that's going to look different person to person. Some want to have the hour blocking time. Some want to do something on Google Calendar. I tend to be the same way. I get so fixated on the colors and the spacing and all this that I never really execute it because I'm just focused on the minutia of how it looks
Yeah.
aesthetically. But if nothing else, I think figure out what your daily schedule is. What are your hours? I'm very, very firm on the fact that I really try to not take any calls before 9 o'clock in the morning. And that's just because my morning schedule involves my morning routine, getting my girls ready for school, and understanding what that real work hour daily schedule is for me. It's like I said, from like 9:15 to 2:45. So making sure that you position the most important tasks there, whether it is a power list and you have, 3, 5 things that you have to get accomplished, that's what gets done there. If it's too restrictive for you to work in 30-minute, 1 hour increments where you're writing things in and blocking the time that way, that's okay. I know one thing that's helped for me is doing time blocking where I will dedicate certain hours to this particular task. Some people like to, do day blocking where they will take all calls on one day, meetings on another, content creation on a third day. So really, it's about finding whatever technique works for you, and you may have to try several of them. For me, time blocking works great. I know that every day I'm going to spend an hour on client retention. I've got this block of time for this particular podcast and this call. So to see things out in those hour blocks helps me to stay focused because I know, like Lauren said, I only have that 1 hour to get really good at making sure I get those things done. And when I open up my retention system and I see that I have 60 clients I have to reach out to, and I know I have 1 hour of time, I'm not going to fuck off during that hour because I can't. The next hour, there's already something scheduled in that time block and it's going to eat away at that time. So I become very disciplined in doing that, and time blocking works well for me, but it's not the end all be all. Some people prefer to do that by day and that works too.
Yeah, I would love that, and I do some version of that, but with traveling and just always moving around, it just doesn't really seem to work out. There's certain days that are heavier with client loads, and those days stay the same, but everything else kind of moves, you know what I mean, around it.
Sure.
And I've tried to figure out like what's the best way, like all call it. I'm like it doesn't work because then what if I set all my calls for a Thursday and then I'm gone on a Thursday? Like it just doesn't
Right.
make sense. So you can look at other people's stuff and see what they do for, hey, okay, what are some options? But like Steph said, there are literally so many different ways, and just start small. Just start with something. Get a paper planner, or if you like, and you're not as neurotic as us, you can use something like Google Calendar. Do that, and just have, and even if it doesn't have to be a planner, if you want to just start really basic, a to do list. Sticky notes, to do lists, like that can be just so useful to have that visually in front of you, like okay, these are some of the things I need to do. And there is something very satisfying about checking that off. Now you
Checking it
don't need to be
off.
like brush my teeth, well maybe if you
Right.
don't brush your teeth, but you don't need to get crazy with the to-do list. Have it be things that actually like need to be done. Like took a shower, you're like okay great, like check that off, like hopefully we're already able to do that.
Right.
But
No, I think that's such a good point because that's what Andy talks about with this power list. If it's something that's already habitual, it's already an ingrained part of your day. You do not need to list that out. So same thing. If I post my daily schedule on my Instagram, because I get a lot of questions like, what do you do all day long? So it helps keep me accountable, but it also gives people a little sneak into my life. And they'll say that same thing like, well, when do you shower? When do you eat? I'm like, that's embedded there within that schedule. I'm not going to write those things down because I know that those are things I'm going to inherently do. So that's a really great point because I think people can get really lost in that and think that they need to schedule everything down, including all those self-care things and your workout and your walk. And if that's already something that you have,
yeah.
you know, it doesn't need to necessarily be on that list. But for me, that's
or
incredibly gratifying to go through and check my 5 things off each day. It's a win and move on.
or you do block out, you say morning routine, and
Sure.
in your mind, okay, morning routine means, skincare, shower, 10-minute walk, read a few pages of a book, meditate, whatever it is. Like, that that's going to take you an hour, let's just say, and you block off that time. I know for me that it's really easy for me to just get up and just kind of la da da, and then like just do stuff, right? Like I can just get right into it. And recognizing that again, those are all things that I love to do. Like I love reading, but for the most part, it's probably not going to happen unless I'm doing it earlier. Oftentimes at night, if I am training jujitsu, I'm doing that, or I'm just really tired and I'm like, I can't focus on this book that's trying to teach me something. You know what I mean? So while I do enjoy reading at night, it just often doesn't happen. So for me, it's like, all right, gotta get up, get moving. And once that becomes ingrained, it's no issue. But um and the other thing too, I think, is when people hear this kind of stuff, and I know at least, I never try to paint this like perfect picture of like anything, right? But like, for example, that like setting that morning routine, like everybody feels better when they go for a walk in the morning, and everybody feels better with, the sun exposure for so many reasons, and getting a few things checked off their list, like they feel great. But does that happen every day for us? No, there are certainly days where we don't do that. And it doesn't mean that like you are this huge failure, or like anything like that. So guess what? If you don't hit, whatever your perfect morning routine or whatever it is, okay, reassess. Why didn't that happen? And adjust for the next day, and then just get back on it, because building momentum takes a while. It's really easy to fall off that momentum. Like literally it can go from like you're on a streak of like 2 weeks to like 1 day off, and then you're like, oh, whatever, I'm lazy again, I don't want to do this. Like
Right.
it is so easy to fall into bad habits. That's why they're bad habits, right? So it's always about, okay, how do I stick to this, how do I correct it? But it's never a perfect system, it's never a perfect science. But like you said, I got 60 people to reach out to in this hour block. Well, it's either going to get done or now it's not, or now something else isn't going to get done. So how does that affect the rest of your week? And for certain things that are maybe, if it's not as important, oh, I can do that next week. Okay. But if it needs to get done, now everything's getting pushed back, and now you're going to have to be working for extra late for that late block. And it's just,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there has to be a level of flexibility in there. And I think that that assessment piece is really crucial too, because if you look at, okay, 3 days in a row, I didn't get up and get my morning walk in. Well, why? Why was that? Is it that you weren't disciplined enough at night to get yourself in bed, so you kept hitting snooze? And it's not about carrying those feelings of guilt. It's not about stopping your momentum. It's taking that information, analyzing it, and making sure that that's not going to be a roadblock or an obstacle moving forward. That's exactly what it's about, right? So that you do continue to stack those wins, because it feels great at the end of the day to check it all off and feel successful, but it can also feel pretty crappy when you're moving things from one day over to the next because you just didn't do what you needed to do, or life happens. There are a lot of variables that come out of nowhere when you have kids. The person gets sick, or this, practice gets called early, or whatever. So there has to be that flexibility piece in there, and that's just part of life. Like Lauren said, it can look perfect, you can have this written out well, but things are going to happen. But I think the more you can have that schedule and keep to your routine, the better you feel, the more in control you feel. That's a really common complaint I hear from a lot of my clients, is just that need for control. So many parts of our life that spin out of control, but you sure can control this. There are lots of the parts of your day that you can control. Not all of them, of course, but there's more, I think, that you can control than you believe you can. And so being able to see that builds that confidence, helps to build that momentum. And you find that you start almost craving that routine. When I have to travel, same thing. I get a little uncomfortable that I'm not back to my normal routine. So when I do get home, I'm like, oh, this feels so good. It's nice to have that time away, but it's also, there's something, and maybe it's just me, my OCD neuroticism, but something that feels really good about being back into that routine.
yeah, no, I would say that most people feel that way. I mean, maybe not everybody, but I would say that most people like to have that kind of, at least know what to expect, and you have some type of routine going every day. And even if your days look different, some people's days look very different every day. If you do shift work,
Sure.
if you're on shift one day or you're off shift the next day, your day is going to look very different, right? Or depending on just the type of work that you do, or your family life, or whatever's going on. Like, if there's a bunch of practices in the beginning of the week but not the second part of the week, like, so there's always going to be variation for every day. But it is about setting things up and saying, okay, how, and this is the same thing that goes with diet, like same thing goes with diet and training and lifestyle. Like all of these things are what we, work on with clients. Like, okay, hey, we didn't hit the plan this week. Like what happened? Like it's not just like, oh, you didn't hit it. Okay, there needs to be more to that. Why didn't you hit it? What happened beforehand? What could you have done? What didn't you do? And we kind of step back and look at that process. And that's how we make adjustments. So the same thing goes not just for, making sure that you're hitting, diet, hitting training, hitting all these things. This also applies to your time management. And they all do go together. Obviously, when we're in that groove of everything, it all seems to kind of click easier because we are putting ourselves in a position to actually work when we're feeling productive. And that's a really, really great thing, too.
Yeah. And one of the last tips I would have, and this is a place where I've made a massive change in my own life, I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, is really learning to maximize the weekend and front load the upcoming week. So this is a place where I was awful. Friday afternoon, I check out, I am done. I'm not looking at my computer again. And then Sunday night, that feeling. It's apprehension, it's anxiety. You're like, oh shit, I have so much to do. And you see that you roll into the week already feeling behind, already feeling overwhelmed. So this is something where I've really changed it. I no longer have, Sunday fun day. And it's not to say that I work all weekend. I do a very diligent job of making sure on Saturdays, that is time for me. That is time for my family. I rarely get on social media. I do a few things in the morning before anyone's up. And then that is a day that I dedicate to the other parts of my life that need my attention. And, there's a better part of Sunday where that happens too. But what I now do is I really make sure that on Sundays, I have everything set with the house. Our schedules are synced up. I have written down all of the things that I need to accomplish over the course of the week. And as many of those days as I can get completely filled in, I have that done. I even, look at things like, okay, I've got a couple of hours. Maybe we're sitting out in the boat as a family and everyone's just laying out in the sun or swimming. What could I do on the boat for those 2 hours? I can write some call notes. I can sit in the sun and enjoy my family and get some call notes written down. And that's a good productive use of that time. So this is definitely a place where I have made an adjustment in my life instead of just totally blowing off on the weekends, finding time, whether it works on Saturday nights for you or Sunday mornings, whatever that is, finding a little bit of time where you can carve that out to go ahead and at least set yourself up for success for the week, whether that is doing your grocery shopping or meal prepping or getting your calendar synced up or just even making sure that your space is organized and you've got chores done and kids clothes are laid out or whatever that's going to look like and translate to in your life. That has been an incredible help. Then I go into Monday feeling affirmed. I feel in control, and it's not that chasing my tail from jump as it used to be every single Monday.
Yeah, and I think it was a great point that you touched on, not just with work, but with everything else, right? Like that's when you're either gonna get other things done or you're going to plan to get other things done. And you're not just kind of because you same thing, sitting around and then and I think too though it's important to have those days as well. But I think people really undervalue what they can do in like an hour or two, right? Like you can again back to like, hey, your back's against the wall, you got an hour to do this. You can
Yeah,
get a lot done. So if you're like, all right, I'm going to set up the week, I'm gonna, have some tie up some loose ends with like, work stuff, or I'm gonna go set up, plan the meals for this week, go get the grocery shopping done. Whatever it is, like you can get a lot done in a short amount of time. And then saying it's so much more satisfying to then say, I've got this done, and now I'm gonna spend the rest of the time, with family or to just relax or to do whatever it is. It's much better than like, oh, I'll do a little bit of work this morning and then let me just kind of chill. And then, oh, I gotta go do this. And then you always feel like you're doing something and you never actually have that downtime. So I think that
exactly.
also scheduling that part in, if it is really important to have some time to where you are able to just kind of turn off, especially if you are somebody who works at home or works for yourself. It's very easy to always constantly be on. So setting up time too to be like, I'm going to get these important things done at this time, whether it's the morning, afternoon, evening, and then I'm going to spend the rest of this time, you know, blocked off to do nothing. I know for me that's kind of turned into like my Saturdays, right? Like if I have clients competing, of course, that's, I have to, talk with them. But generally speaking, I do like very little work unless I have, unless I'm traveling or unless I have, a presentation coming up or something like that. Saturday just kind of ends up being one of those days where I usually lift in the morning, go to jujitsu in the afternoon. And because it's the weekend, it's kind of like just longer and everybody just kind of hangs out. We talk. Sometimes we go get food, it's kind of this whole process, like might do something social that night, might not. Like that's kind of my day to like recharge and like get a few little odds and ends done. But that's really a day where I'm like, I'm not actively doing a lot of stuff. I've loved when I'm home on Sundays to take advantage of Sundays. Like I've just something about that, whether it's like recording podcasts and getting, those keyed up, whether it's just, doing some kind of back end work or, hey, shopping lists, like planning the week, all of that. It's so much better. And because then Monday you can wake up and you're actually ready to like work, not like, let me get all of these things together. And that is one of the hardest things when you do travel a lot is you always feel like off because of that. But try your best, even if you are traveling, you are out of your normal routine, to take time to figure out when you're going to get all those things done. And trust me, I get it. It's a whole thing, because when you're planning the trip, you're like all excited. You're like, yeah, yeah, I'll just stay later and I'll just do this. And you have all these grand plans, and then you're taking that flight and you're like, oh shit, like I'm exhausted. I
Yeah.
am so disorganized. Now I gotta get home. And if you're like me, you gotta unpack, do the whole thing like basically right away. And so factor that in too. Factor that part into your schedule. Hey, I'm traveling these days. Guess what? I'm gonna unpack and I'm gonna, get all of this done, because if you don't plan it, then it's just gonna be this looming thing that's just kind of like dragging you down for the rest of the week.
Yeah, and I think you raised a couple of good points there in that we can't always live and die by this schedule. Right? I do the same thing on Saturdays. I really just try to shut off and not worry about those kinds of things. Find enjoyment in maybe going to take a little bit of a longer walk, or like you said, meeting up with friends or whatever. And I think another place where I've changed is I used to sleep in all Saturday morning. I love my sleep, so I'd sleep in all Saturday morning and do the same thing Sunday. And now I try to reel it in. I set kind of a moderate alarm for Saturday, so I'm not sleeping all day. But then on Sunday, I set a decently early alarm, and it works well for me and my life and my family because I can get up and have a couple of hours of quiet before the house is awake. And that's where I can get that focus time done. So just like Lauren said, then when we make the decision, hey, we're going to go, for the rest of the afternoon, go spend time on the boat, I can go and I can enjoy that and not have this constant to-do list cycling in my head, like, oh shit, we need to hurry up and get home. I got this and I got that. It allows me to be present and really enjoy that time and not be anxious and worried about all of these other things that I've had to do. But again, this is going to look different person to person. You have to take into account all these factors: your work schedule, your travel schedule, family, all of the needs. But there's certainly some commonalities, and I think there's certainly places where you can audit this and do a better job of managing it. And I think it's also really important to mention that there are two critical skills that you need to have good time management. Number one is you have to have good self management. And this is where a lot of people struggled last year when all of a sudden they had to work from home. They didn't have that framework, or maybe they do have this beautiful Google Calendar and it looks wonderful, but if you can't properly manage yourself, that calendar isn't going to matter. And again, this is a place where I wasn't seeing the translation and I was really getting frustrated. It was because I wasn't managing myself. I knew what to do. I had this beautiful calendar, but I was allowing myself to get incredibly thrown off by all these notifications going off, or down this rabbit hole. So making sure that I implemented things I needed to better manage myself. And for me, that meant shutting off all my phone notifications. So I'm not constantly pulled and seeing these messages come up. And, if I have something that requires a lot of focus and attention, I'll put my phone on the other side of the room. So for that hour, I can't even get to it. I force myself to work on my laptop so I don't see these things constantly coming through. I no longer wear a tracker watch because that was an issue for me and pulling me in a lot of distracted ways. So that self-management piece is crucial. And it's the exact same thing that we work on with our clients. We can write them the perfect plan, but if they don't manage themselves within that plan, then it doesn't matter. They're never going to get to that outcome, right? So we have to have good self-management, and I think we also have to have the discipline to execute the plan. And the two are, they go together for sure, but I think when we have people with a lack of self-discipline, this becomes very, very difficult. So really thinking about those two pieces, utilizing the tools that you need to manage yourself properly, whether that is a calendar or notifications or whatever it is going to be in particular for you, but then also having the discipline to execute this consistently over time. That's where we're going to see results always.
100%. And that speaks to so many things I think both of us can relate to, like, yeah, you know what to do, right? But are you actually doing it? Are you actually
Sure.
implementing it? And you need to take down those barriers. And that's where the audits really are helpful, because it really shows you, oh, I thought I was doing this, but I'm clearly not. And where am I really struggling? It will really reveal to you where you keep getting hung up. And if you see the same trend 3 or 4 times, that's something to take note of, you know? That's something to say, okay, this is not just one day that it affected me. And we all know those things, right? Like we can all have it in our heads, but sometimes just having that like visible audit is really nice to be like, oh shit, this is like literally calling me out of my shit.
Right. It
Um,
is.
but even then you say, okay, now I'm creating a better schedule. You still have to stick to it. And I think that everybody is going to operate, differently, again, within their different lives. But you need to have that discipline and recognize that, why are you doing this? Right. Going back to
What's
that,
the goal? Right.
why are you even doing this? Are you doing this so that you can move forward in your career? Are you doing this so you can spend more time with your family? Are you doing this because you want to work on a separate side thing later, whether that's a hobby or another, like extra training, whatever it might be. Like there's got to be a reason why you want to be more productive. And I can't name one person who doesn't want to be more productive, you know what I mean? And not just busy, productive, because busy doesn't mean anything. I would rather somebody be productive in 4 hours and then be able to do whatever they want for the rest of the day versus be busy for 8 hours, because there is really nobody cares. You don't
No.
get a trophy for being busy or anything like that. Like it's just you're the only person that it's harming, and everybody else that really you could impact in a positive way. So think about it that way. There's always something that we probably want to be more productive for, that we could spend more time on. um, so yeah, I would highly encourage you guys to start with some of these things that Steph laid out, and especially just start with that audit. Be very honest, and then everything can kind of be a springboard from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you so much for having me on today. I appreciate
of
it. I hope this is
course.
valuable to your client base. And, like Lauren said, it's a work in progress, but there will be some things that are glaringly obvious to you. When I work with a client and, she's a mom of three and she says, well, I'm spending 3 hours at the ball field during practice. And I can ask, well, what are you doing during those 3 hours? Watching practice. I was so proud. I had a client the other day and she posted a picture and she said, how's my daughter's or sitting at my daughter's soccer practice? How's it going? And then the next slide is she said, I have no idea because I'm busy working on my goals while she's working on hers. And she was out there getting her walk in during that practice time. And, listen, I understand that pull and that guilt as a parent, but it was so nice to see, right? It's so refreshing to see that during those 3 hours, you're not just sitting there scrolling social media or halfway watching your kid, because you like to think you're there, you're participating, you're watching them practice. You're not. You're on your phone catching up with stuff on Facebook, right? So you can still do that. Just go walk while you're doing that. And, finding those little dead spaces is so key, because, like Lauren said, I tell my clients this all the time: busy is bullshit. As a stay-at-home mom, I was busy all day long, but I got nothing done. There was zero productivity, and that felt really empty to me. So having those productive hours of the day was a massive change. And I started to eliminate the time wasters. I started to say no to a lot of things that didn't align with my goals. And I think that that's important too, is setting those boundaries, holding firm. If that's your time to go work out, keep that promise to yourself, and set those boundaries and learn that you don't have to say yes to everything. It was really empowering to do that. Having the teacher say, "Can you be the room mom again for the fifth year in a row?" And as much as I want to say yes, put me on your list of people to help with that, but I can't do that this year because I've done that, I've given that, right? And that's just one example. But I think that learning to set those boundaries, all of these techniques that come together definitely maximizes your productivity. It helps you to be fully present, but then also allow you to be your best self and work on these other goals that you may have, whether it's a physical goal or something professional that you're trying to pursue. It's going to free up that time, right?
100%. So thank you so much. This was great.
Sure.
Where can people follow you, find more information about
Sure.
you?
So I have a website, Warrior Fit One. The number one, warriorfit1.com is my website. That is also my Instagram handle at warriorfit1. And you guys can always email me info@warriorfit1.com. Try to keep
Perfect.
it consistent.
No, that is the best. Consistency is key with all of that. I will link all that below. So yeah, thank you guys so much. As always, if you found value in the show, please subscribe and share. We do, really appreciate that, as it does help to grow our show, and really to educate more people, which is what our ultimate goal is. And if you have any other questions for me or for the team, you can visit teamlocafit.com. You can check out the articles, send us an email, apply for coaching, all of that. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.